Governor Patterson and whether or not he acted improperly when getting those Yankees tickets. Mike, we'll start with you here. What did you take out of that 41-page report?
Well, former Judge Kaye, very well-respected person, maybe the most respected in the state, came out with a report on Governor Patterson and whether or not he illegally secured Yankee tickets, and then if he lied about it. The concern is if he lied about it afterwards. This is for the first game of the World Series last year. The report was very thorough, as Judge Kaye always does. Said a lot of really, I thought, damning things. It said that he seemed to have mischaracterized his own comments. He seems to have said things that didn't make sense, that contradicted what other people had said. But in the end, Judge Kaye said a district attorney should take a look at this. Judge Kaye could have come out and said, this is perjury. He should be charged. But it didn't. It came up short. So the result in what we looked at this is that, a nasty report about the goings-on in the governor's office about this issue, basically about a cover-up, although they didn't use that word. But the governor, again, did not get charged with anything. And he's probably somewhat satisfied with that.
Yeah, certainly. And we saw the statement from his attorney, Ted Wells, right afterwards saying the report doesn't say that he flat out lied. The report doesn't recommend perjury, so they're hoping that they drop the charges.
That's sort of a stretch. I mean, it's going to go to David Soares now, who's the Albany County DA. The last time that Soares saw this kind of perjury charge was with Darren Dopp. I just spoke with Darren Dopp. Dopp said that out of all of the people that he had an encounter with during this Troopergate investigation, Soares was the most pleasant to deal with, the most honest broker. Soares also said something to him about why he couldn't understand why the CPI was pursuing a perjury charge when it was sort of based on something such minutia. And if that is Soares' sort of MO, I'm wondering what's going to happen with this, because a lot of people think that this is also sort of a small thing.
As much as Darren Dopp, who was the communications director for Elliot Spitzer, feels that way about David Soares, the Albany County District Attorney, a lot of people don't think very much of David Soares as a district attorney. There's also other complications in this case. Judge Kaye brought them up. One is that the governor is legally blind, and part of this case will depend on whether he, as he says, had the correct check in his hand or not. Whether he filled out the check as he thinks he did, may not have. Also, the key figure is going to be David Johnson, DJ Johnson, which is Governor Patterson's one of his longtime aides, who has taken the fifth in the CPI, which is the Commission on Public Integrity investigation. We expect that will continue. Without that testimony, this perjury charge, which is very tough to prove anyway, might not even be brought against the governor. DJ
Johnson is going to possibly be brought up on the misdemeanor assault charges. If the governor is in fact charged and it goes to court and he's found guilty, all of which we have no idea if that will happen, right. He could be charged with a D felony, a Class D felony, which could receive 7 years in prison. So back in March, do you remember when this all came out? It was the domestic violence followed by the Yankees. We all thought that the domestic violence issue would really be the one to get Patterson in the tush, but now it seems like it might be something else.
Actually, I always thought the Yankees case would, because anyone who gets free Yankees tickets is going to upset enough.
Yeah, that's a big deal. That's certainly a big deal.
But yeah, I mean, Susan's exactly right. I mean, these investigations have been going on for a very long time, and really, from Governor Patterson's perspective, where are we now that we were before? With still no charge, still another call for another investigation. So we'll see where this goes.
Yeah, well, there's certainly a lot hanging over his head. And Susan, I know you spoke with him at the State Fair, really right before this report came out.
Can I tell you how painful that was?
I know, you let him go and then this report comes out. But what was he like? I mean, even with all this hanging over his head, he had to know the report was coming. The CPI is still assessing over $100,000 of possible fines against him. What was his demeanor like? What did you get?
Well, he seemed to be a happy-go-lucky governor during his last official tour of the State Fair on a beautiful day. He was just having a very good time. We happened to talk about the cigarette issue and the Senecas and the taxation that's going to be coming up on the 1st of September, this coming Wednesday. They're going to start this tax policy. What intrigued me was that the governor earlier that day on WOR, every week he does this thing with John Gambling, was really alarmist in what he was saying about the possibility of violence. In fact, he said there will be violence. When I asked him about that, he said that's not even really an appropriate thing to talk about. So maybe it was just, you know, a really beautiful day at the fair and he didn't want to go there.
He calmed him down a little bit.
Yeah, he definitely backed off.
Well, you know, I know those comments really had upset some people. Certainly, we're getting a lot of backfire from that. But, Mike, you just wrote about a story that also upset some people concerning Governor Patterson and his comments on the mosque.
Right. We have one of the largest Islamic anti-defamation leagues that supports people who, you know, the Islamic movement and people who criticize them. They have issue with the governor actually defending the developers of the mosque near Ground Zero. To backtrack, the governor said, "I've done some research on this, and this what he called a national hysteria." He said it's devoid of facts. Here's some facts. He looked up the group that's trying to develop the Islamic Center and the mosque, and said they're an almost westernized branch of Islam. He was trying to say that, you know, the critics there who are afraid that they're going to be terrorists or helping terrorists, so there's just nothing to it. Well, in doing that, the Anti-Defamation Society here for the Islamic religion were saying that he made it sound, although he didn't quite come out and say that other branches of Islam are a problem, he sort of inferred that or implied that. He said, this group is okay, it's not like the Shiites. Well, when you say something like that, you're saying something about the other group, even though he didn't directly say it. So now the governor is in a spot for actually defending the group. He's not responding as of right now. But the group is looking for an apology. They say that this is part of the misunderstanding. This is part of the lack of sensitivity for these groups. And they seem to be absolutely right in that there's a misunderstanding out there, and that seems to be fueling all of this.
An absolutely true statement. There are a lot of misunderstandings. And Susan, with you watching this story really grab a national and international spotlight, how have you seen it develop?
Well, I have to tell you, we were talking to Warren Redlick. I don't know if you guys probably know, but a lot of people watching probably don't. He's running for governor on the Libertarian line. He said something that was really interesting, and that is that all on the left and the right, people are picking and choosing the constitutional amendment that they want to support. You know, on the left, they're going to support the right to free speech. On the right, they're going to support the Second Amendment, the right to have a gun. You know, he said it's a document that makes us exceptional as Americans, and either you take it all as it is, or you don't. And the fact that Lazio and Palladino and a lot of other people are not sort of taking it as a whole is a problem.
Well, Mike, Rick Lazio is really starting to hang his hat on this mosque issue. He's making this his campaign issue. He's running his whole campaign on it.
Well, out of fairness, I'd say a lot of the other side of this, those that are being categorized at least as opposed to the mosque, including Rick Lazio, the Republican designee. Rick Lazio specifically is calling for an investigation of the funding. He wants to make sure that there's no funding from Iran, from extremist groups.
He did say if it was at any other Muslim imam, he wouldn't have a problem.
Right. And a lot of the opponents of this are saying that, actually acknowledge, and the polls show this, most people acknowledge there's a constitutional right, a freedom of religion that allows this. Their argument is not so much they can't do it, it's that wouldn't it be better to move it further away from Ground Zero? Right now it's about 2 blocks away. That's most of the argument, and it's becoming a big shouting match because we do have politics now that's really run by the extremes. But somewhere in the middle, you've got people who are trying to work something out and acknowledging that the group, the Cordoba Initiative, has the perfect right to build that. They're saying, this is what Governor Patterson was saying, let's consider some alternatives just to try to make everybody feel better about this, have a better understanding between the cultures.
And Susan, how much of an issue do you think this is going to play into not only the primaries but the general elections? How much legs does this issue have?
I think it's probably going to have some serious legs. I mean, this is 9/11 we're talking about. We're just about there at that 10-year anniversary next year, and people own it. They feel that that was attack on American culture, which of course it was. It's a beautiful thing to talk about in terms of politics, and I know that's very cynical sounding, but in the calculation that these politicians are making, this works for them. If you look at the upstate races, I mean, this is hundreds of miles away from ground zero, but people who are in competitive races like Dan Maffei and Arcuri, they're not saying anything. Or actually, Arcuri is saying that he is not supportive of the mosque. But Dan Maffei, who's a Democrat, hasn't said a word. There are also some other people. John Hall, who has been very progressive on a lot of issues, came out against the president, which I think is surprising.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting watching the dialogue develop, but back to the gubernatorial candidates, both Carl Palladino and Rick Lazio have really made this an issue that they're running on, but yet they're not going to talk to each other about it. They're not going to debate. What do you make of that, Mike?
Yeah, Mike.
Well, it is. I'm going back 4 years ago with John Faso and Elliot Spitzer, and they had 4 or 5. I mean, your organization ran most of them, 4 or 5 debates at least. I remember going all over the state on these. It is something you expect from politicians. Rick Lazio says it's a scheduling conflict. Carl Palladino says he'll go anywhere and has a guy dressed up as a chicken suit saying Rick Lazio's chicken to debate him. But if they're not going to do it, they're not going to do it. In fairness, Carl Palladino could show up somewhere where Rick Lazio is going to be. I mean, there is a schedule out there, and I wouldn't be surprised if that does happen. Yeah. But as far as a good debate, like the ones that you guys have been putting on, that does not look like it's in the cards at this time. Now, public outcry could change that.
Right.
Rick Lazio would have to figure out that it's more important, or it's going to cost him more to not debate than to risk going into a debate. One of the things Rick Lazio, who's the designee of the Republican Party, doesn't want to do is he doesn't really want to give equal footing to Carl Palladino, who petitioned his way into a primary. So the problem with that is right now in the polls we see Carl Palladino rising and we see Rick Lazio dropping a little bit.
He's got nowhere to go, Lazio. I mean, either, Palladino hasn't yet begun to spend. You know, it's going to happen very, very soon with his millions of dollars, and Lazio doesn't have really anything in the bank. If he keeps dropping in the polls, why wouldn't he debate?
Yeah, what do you think this does to his campaign not to? Because the justification we got was scheduling conflict. We offered him any date between now and September 14th. He said, we're booked. We can't take any date. What do you think that does, and how do you think he looks in the public eye for refusing that debate?
Well, certainly he could be booked up. Then again, politicians and candidates have control over their own lives, okay? And he, via free will, could decide to debate Carl Palladino if he really wanted to. So I'm not sure that that is really a valid sort of excuse. Another excuse that I've heard was that he is the designee of the GOP, as Michael said, and that he doesn't want to give Palladino a forum. Politically, in terms of like a political campaign consultant, that might fly if he was doing really well. Remember Mario Cuomo not coming to the debate with all of the other people who were running against him in the primary. This is back in 1996, I believe. And the thing is, he could get away with that to some degree during a primary because he was a sitting governor. Lazio can't get away with that.
Yeah, if you're Rick Lazio, do you hold out for a debate with Andrew Cuomo, or do you take it to Carl Palladino and try and get a point in or two?
Well, I'm not Rick Lazio. You can be sure I'll never be running for office. Rick Lazio's, in fairness, what he's saying is that our focus is on Andrew Cuomo, the Democratic nominee. That's all we're going after. We're not taking a step. We're going full steam ahead. We have the conservative endorsement, which is very, very important in New York State. And Rick Lazio says we're going ahead. Now, as opposed to going to debates, Rick Lazio is starting to put out some television commercials and a lot of web-based commercials. Some are paid for by the Conservative Party. And Rick Lazio comes off very, very well in those. I mean, if you've seen him, I mean, he's just very comfortable in front of a camera. Now, if we go back to his race with Hillary Rodham Clinton, that debate didn't work out very well for him. That was the debate, you might remember, he went and brought over paper to Senator, or to First Lady
Clinton.
And
he did meet the sausage.
Yes, at the state fair. And so it didn't come off. But I don't think that he's afraid. I think he knows that he would do very well and against Carl Palladino. Palladino would be a completely different character.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it could work out well for Lazio, don't you think? I mean, Palladino is obviously very passionate. If you like him, he's very outspoken and a game changer. And if you don't like him, he is a hothead and you know, can fly off the wall. Whatever, that might not be everybody's cup of tea, and Lazio is certainly